Across 1,000 chapters, One Piece is filled with countless phenomenal story arcs, and even One Piece's weakest arcs all shine in at least one area. So what is the best aspect of each One Piece arc? What does each arc do best? I'm gonna go through the whole series, from Romance Dawn all the way through Egghead Island, and make a case for the biggest strength of each storyline. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe for more One Piece videos every week. To begin with Romance Dawn, I personally believe that what it does best is the hero's introduction. Not Kid Luffy scarring himself with the knife, rather I would argue that the real start of Luffy's adventures kicks off with him breaking out of the barrel. I and many others may be biased to viewing this as Luffy's true introduction, as this is when he first appears in the anime, and that's what most of us started with. But I think it still fits even in the context of the manga, as symbolically this moment of him breaking out of a barrel is the first time that we get a clear idea of who our hero is, and it's the starting point of the events of the story. Whereas Romance Dawn overall is a nice, simple start to the series, the way it introduces the hero with a memorable moment that captures the essence of Luffy and sets the tone for what to expect from him from here on is, in my opinion, what it does most effectively as the first arc of the story. Next up in Orangetown, this will likely be a surprise to many readers, but I think its greatest strength is its villain. That might not make much sense considering the villain is Buggy, but it's easy to forget that before Buggy was reduced to a gag character, he was actually a legitimately imposing villain at first. This is not to say that Buggy is the best villain in the series, just that he is what stands out most about Orangetown specifically. Even though now he seems like an actual clown, initially the concept of a murderous clown with devilish abilities was a sharp step up from the pushovers we were dealing with before. Higuma, Alvida, Morgan, Helmeppo, etc. Not to mention, Buggy had a large fleet, notable subordinates, was terrorizing an entire village, and actually even got the better of Zoro in their first encounter. Even just the way Buggy was drawn early on portrayed him as more of an actual threat, and to be honest, there just isn't that much else that stands out about Orangetown, though feel free to make a case in the comments below. With Syrup Village, I think this stands out as the first decent character writing in One Piece, with the Usopp-centric storyline. Again, the arcs before this were fairly simplistic. I don't think Luffy, Zoro, or Nami had any particularly compelling writing in their initial introductions. Kobe learning to stand up for himself was pretty basic stuff, but Usopp was the first character with a bit more to him. A kid playing at pirates who would take great pleasure running around through town telling lies, all the while hiding deeper pains from his past that drive him to act out like this. And the arc was ultimately about Usopp having to learn to grow out of his childhood silliness and try to become the man that he always dreamed of being. With Baratie, I think its greatest strength is clear. It was the first hype character introduction in the story. One of the absolute greatest strengths of One Piece in general, creating and introducing exciting characters that give us a sense of the tremendous scale of the world, all began in Baratie with Mihawk. Now you might argue we'd already seen Shanks at this point, but at the time we had no real gauge as to how strong Shanks was supposed to be back then. Mihawk was the first guy that we knew was a huge fish that had wandered into the small pond of East Blue, and he told us as much himself. And seeing the gap between the world's strongest and the Straw Hat Pirates basically set expectations astronomically high for the true level of the seas ahead. I always say if you're getting someone into One Piece, at least try to get them to Baratie, as Mihawk's introduction is the first really hype moment the series has. However, while I think you should at least try and get a new reader to Baratie at the minimum, ideally you need to get them to Arlong Park, as this arc's greatest strength is in the first classic backstory of One Piece, Nami's backstory. In a series infamous for its tearjerker backstories, Arlong Park is the first one to really pack a punch and set the standard for all future One Piece heartbreakers. This is the arc that shows the reader for the first time that One Piece is not just a kid's action adventure, it can hit emotional highs that you would never expect. With Loguetown, despite being an extremely short arc, its greatest strength is its atmosphere. This is the town of beginning and end, where the legend of the last Pirate King closed and the legend of the new Pirate King will begin. For such an epic step in the journey, the atmosphere needs to match, and boy does it deliver. It begins calmly enough, but with a mysterious wind blowing through. As the arc progresses and the sense of danger rises with Luffy's head on the chopping block and an unstoppable opponent hunting down the crew, everything spirals into a tumultuous storm, and the use of lightning and wind throughout the climax is perfect. with the crew fittingly kicking off their grand journey to conquer the Grand Line amidst thunder and waves. Unfortunately, this is followed by Reverse Mountain, which is the only arc where I think there is no strength. Legitimately, there is nothing I can think of that is particularly good about these few chapters. I do personally care more about Laboon now after learning about Brook's backstory, but at the time, I don't know how many people, while initially experiencing Reverse Mountain, legitimately gave a f about this random whale. If there is anything good about Reverse Mountain, let me know in the comments below. Thankfully, after Reverse Mountain, we have Whiskey Peak, which is the perfect storyline to really kick off the Grand Line by creating a longer plot thread. While the bounty hunters on Whiskey Peak weren't that strong themselves, introducing this huge mystery organization Baroque works, with the prospect of having to deal with numbered agents that would get stronger and stronger in future arcs, as well as putting the Straw Hats on track to have to go save an entire kingdom, Whiskey Peak basically got the readers invested in a much bigger storyline than the arc itself. And while plot-wise Whiskey Peak gave us what we wanted out of the Grand Line, I think Little Garden gave us what we wanted in terms of introducing more fantastical elements. It's easy to forget, but in early One Piece, the islands were all fairly normal. The weirdest it got was some strange animals on one island. However, we were promised an ocean that was supernatural and impossible for humans to comprehend, and the first time we really get that injection of fantasy setting into the series is Little Garden. Not only do we get ancient giants that have been battling for hundreds of years, it's on a prehistoric island with countless dinosaurs running around. This is the kind of zaniness that we wanted out of the Grand Line. Next, Drum Kingdom gave us, in my opinion, the best backstory character in all of One Piece, Hiruluk. This is probably a contentious pick since there are so many great options, Bellemere, Sol, Corazon, and so on, but I think Hiruluk edges them out just barely. Partly because I feel that Chopper's backstory could also be considered just as much Hiruluk's story. I think Hiruluk is the only one of these parental backstory figures where we get to delve into his dreams, his tragic past and failures, just as much as the child's. Hiruluk once went through his own redemption arc in the past, and decided to dedicate his life to helping people even without the means to do so. Carried only by a good heart, the quack doctor who was rejected and laughed at again and again, and despised by the village, still wanted nothing more than to cure their hearts. And on top of that, I think he ultimately provides the most resonant and memorable messaging of any of the backstory figures, with the speech about when a man truly dies. Not to mention, the arc itself closes with his legacy finally helping heal the island. With Alabasta, the greatest strength is its sense of scale. Alabasta feels like a far more grand and epic conflict than anything the series has had up till now. Dealing with a nationwide war spanning multiple days, with millions of lives at stake, it completely changes what we can expect One Piece conflicts to be from here on. However, Alabasta is also one of the rare arcs that also manages this vast sense of scale very well. Despite centering around a massive kingdom at civil war and having to defeat a huge organization, the Alabasta arc never feels bloated, never drags, and has exactly as many characters and plotlines as it needs. It manages to create a gigantic conflict while still maintaining focus on the tight emotional core of characters and their journey to resolving this conflict. The Jaya arc is probably best remembered for Luffy's punch on Bellamy, but I would say that the greatest strength of the arc overall was opening up the world. Everything up till Jaya was really just focused on the Straw Hats in a bubble. That outside world building that we're so fond of, it actually didn't happen at all till Jaya. With Jaya, we were introduced to Whitebeard and his fleet, the Gorosei, Sengoku, a full-fledged meeting of the Shichibukai, and even the Blackbeard pirates to top it all off. Before this, the best that we would get was a single Shichibukai appearance once every 100 chapters or so. Jaya was the arc that showed us that there are a bunch of major players throughout the world that all have varying interests and motivations. This was essentially our introduction to the One Piece world as we know it. For Skypiea, this may be cheating, but I would say the foreshadowing. When we initially experienced the arc, we didn't know that most of what we were seeing was foreshadowing for the future. But now we can go back and see that the arc is filled to the brim with hints about future events and the true broader conflict of the story. I think this arc, more than any other, represents Oda's brilliant foreshadowing. The Long Ring Long Land arc's greatest strength was in handing the protagonists their first defeat. Luffy had lost before, but the fight against Aokiji was the first time that the entire crew was crushed. That was pivotal to setting a sense of stakes and tension heading into the Water 7 arc, an arc that would focus heavily on whether or not the Straw Hats really have what it takes to survive and succeed as a pirate crew. As for the Water 7 arc, and I'm grouping this together with Enies Lobby here as it really is just all one continuous storyline, the greatest strength is of course the emotion. It is hard to recreate the emotions of this storyline, considering the entire crew was beginning to fall apart. With Usopp not only leaving but coming to blows with Luffy, Robin seemingly betraying the crew, the Going Merry having to be put down, the Straw Hats went through an absolute emotional ringer, capped off with us learning about arguably the saddest backstory in One Piece, Robin's, which Oda himself outright said he believed he would never be able to top. And then all of that is reversed with the Straw Hats rallying to fight back against the world itself, culminating in the most dramatic and emotionally raw victory the Straw Hats have ever had in the story, with Usopp's speech to Luffy spurring the iconic Jet Gatling to win the battle against the world government, plus the merry funeral afterwards as the cherry on top. In terms of the highs and lows of emotion, Enies Lobby's range is hard to match. With Thriller Bark, its greatest strength was its surprise ending. The entire conflict with Moria was fun but fairly standard. However, what took the arc to another level was the reveal that Kuma was the true final obstacle, one that the Straw Hats could not hope to defeat through strength. Instead, to turn him away, the crew put on the ultimate display of resolve and loyalty, with Zoro in particular producing one of the most iconic One Piece moments to date. Not a traditional ending or final conflict, but one of the most powerful ones in the entire series. With Sabaody Archipelago, I personally view it as the ultimate roller coaster of plot twists. Outside of maybe the final stretch of Marineford, I don't think there has ever been a set of a dozen chapters that has repeatedly shocked the viewer back to back to back the way Sabaody did. From the reveal that the mysterious shipwright was the Pirate King's right hand, to Luffy actually punching a celestial dragon, to the news that the Whitebeard pirates are going to war with the world government over Ace, to the truth about Roger's execution, to the unveiling of the Pacifista army, and finally the absolute demolition and separation of the Straw Hat Pirates by Kuma, this was the craziest sequence of events we had ever gotten in One Piece up till that point. Amazon Lily's greatest strength is probably just its fan service if we're being honest. Impel Down is probably the most fun I've had seeing Luffy as the underdog. In most arcs, Luffy is actually pretty overpowered. There is usually only one other character on any given island that is as strong or stronger than him, and that is the villain that he needs to ultimately defeat. Oda has even outright said that that's why he has to think of so many ways to keep Luffy out of the action until it's time to fight the final villain. Otherwise, he would end the plot too soon. In Impel Down, nearly every single level is a significant challenge for Luffy. There are monsters that he can't just easily beat. There are guards that give him significant difficulty and push him to his limit. All of that is before even getting to Magellan, who Luffy never has a chance against, and ends the arc ultimately just having to run away from him. Not to mention, this is the first arc where Luffy isn't the strongest character on the protagonist's side. He's actually a small fry compared to some of his allies here like Ivankov and Jinbei. However, unlike Marineford, where Luffy is also an underdog but is supposed to get crushed, in Impel Down we get to watch Luffy actually succeed, despite being too weak to play his usual role as the heroic champion who just beats up the bad guys. The Impel Down storyline really feels like Luffy is just a little guy with a lot of pluck, trying to rally some friends together just to escape insurmountable odds, which is a context we'll probably never see him in again. And of course, as I just said, Marineford involves Luffy getting crushed. In my opinion, the Marineford arc's greatest strength is tragedy. The death of Ace, the death of Whitebeard, Blackbeard's victory, Luffy's sense of total defeat, these are all things that changed One Piece forever. In fact, the tragedy of Marineford literally split the story in half, as from here on, the heroes had to pick themselves back up and come back stronger. The Post-Marineford arc interestingly has, in my opinion, the best world building in all of One Piece, covering everyone's motivations and setting up countless plot lines from Sengoku and Kong, to Aokiji and Smoker, to Dragon and Ivankov, to Doflamingo and Moria, to Akainu and Blackbeard, to all of the supernovas and so on. This section of the story is probably the most comprehensive sweep of the entire One Piece world, and is probably the single best representation of how vast and well developed this world and cast of characters is. Fishman Island's greatest strength is its themes, the plight of the Fishman people and how this is related to the plight of the world at large, as well as the first real focus on the thematic significance of the sun and what it represents, all built off the back of two of the best flashbacks in One Piece. Altogether definitely make Fishman Island's themes shine as its greatest attribute. Punk Hazard, as the first New World arc, fittingly stands out best for its outstanding setup for future arcs. Even if you don't care for the plot of Punk Hazard itself, let's not forget it established the existence of the underworld, the plotline to take down Joker, aka Doflamingo, the Smile Fruits plot thread, the long-term goal to take down Kaido, as well as setting up the key characters for Wano, Kinemon, and Momonosuke to tie those future threads together. Dressrosa's greatest strength, in my opinion, is something people may find surprising, which is management of multiple plot threads. The reason people may be confused by this, especially if you were a weekly reader, is that for a long time Dressrosa was viewed as an extremely bloated arc, with terrible pacing that was just constantly cutting between various characters and fights and plotlines while barely moving any of them forward an inch. Dressrosa was certainly the first arc to try and handle so many different plotlines and characters at once, between the Coliseum fighters and the Straw Hats and Law and the Tontadas and Kiros and Rebecca and Riku and then Sabo and Fujitora and Koala. The arc just kept piling on more and more. However, now that we've had the Wano plotline, with Act 2 and 3 being similarly bloated like Dressrosa, I've definitely come to appreciate Dressrosa in hindsight a lot more for handling the multitude of threads and characters far more effectively. Even if it was slow going at times, ultimately everything in Dressrosa that is set up is followed through on. Everyone that is given focus does have their story come full circle, and nearly all characters on the island are made to feel relevant by the end. In Zou, I felt the biggest strength was the lore reveals. We had just finished an extremely narratively dense arc in Dressrosa, and what we really needed was to get out of the forest, metaphorically speaking, and just have some time to look out on an open horizon and breathe. And Zou did just that. There was no big conflict, no fights, not many new characters, just a small reunion with the crew, and some time to sit back and get some exciting answers to the bigger questions in the series, as well as some new mysteries to get us amped up for the upcoming plotlines. The road poneglyphs, Zunisha, the ties to Wano, the truth about the path to Laughdale, it all felt surreal to be finally hearing about all this. I would give an honorable mention to Zou having one of the best plot twists in the series. Raizo Dono is safe is certainly my favorite individual moment in Zou. In Whole Cake Island, I actually think its greatest strength is one that is almost never mentioned, which is its setting. When I say setting, I'm going to cheat a little here and say not just the physical environment itself, but how the cast of characters add to the environment. I think Whole Cake was Oda at his most creative when it came to scenery and character design. Whole Cake really is as fantastical as it gets. The seducing woods are straight out of Alice in Wonderland. The fact that the entire island is alive just leads to so much surreal imagery. Big Mom's musical moments in particular are a sort of nightmarish version of Fantasia. The Tea Party is an unforgettable visual spectacle. The Mirror World is too often taken for granted when it is maybe the single coolest battle arena we've ever had in the story, and Oda went absolutely crazy with the character designs throughout this arc, with Big Mom's crew, the Underworld Brokers, Germa 66, and so on. Beyond that, the most recently completed arc, Wano. I think Wano has the single best power-up in all of One Piece. Gear 5th is the best thing that Wano pulled off. Gear 5th is One Piece's version of Super Saiyan. This is what Luffy's abilities were leading to from all the way back in Chapter 1, where he ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi. This is the iconic look that will define him from now on, and the best part is that it's incomparable to any other shonen hero's ability. It's just so distinctively One Piece. Rather than destructive energy blasts, Luffy's final power-up is a literal joke, employing Toonverse powers to fight with reality-warping gags. It's comical, it's fun, it's exciting. Every new move is a showcase of some out-of-the-box ability that we've never seen before. And most importantly, it's true to the hero, embodying the concept of freedom better than any other power-up could. And finally, we have Egghead Island. It's early in the arc, but so far I believe its greatest strength is in finally mixing the micro and macro storytelling of One Piece. I've discussed this in past videos, but for the longest time, Oda has preferred to keep individual arcs focused on the Straw Hats, meaning the micro story, and then after concluding a given arc, shift to the macro story of what is happening in the outside world. In the final saga, it seems that Oda is going to be much more freely cutting between the two levels of the story, and that is absolutely on display right now with Egghead Island so far, where every week we never know what insane outside world development we might be treated to next. So let me know your opinions on each arc's strengths in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my extended, unfiltered thoughts on this and all other One Piece topics on my podcast by becoming a member. Just hit the button below.